Hey everyone, how's it going today? This is the Alberta Prosperity Project. Today we're going to start to discuss about the upcoming members meeting that will be happening on June 17th. It'll be a members only meeting. So if you haven't already got your memberships, please do get them today. As well as if you'd like to get a ticket to the event, you can go to albertaprosperityevents.com. So I'll repeat, it'll be on June 17th. And some of the notable guest speakers will be Dr. Dennis Modry, the former CEO and founder of the Alberta Prosperity Project, Jeff Rath, a barrister and solicitor at Rath and Company, Chris Scott, owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe, Layden Gray, senior partner at Gray Walk Spencer LLP, Michael Wagner, independent researcher and author, and Corey Morgan, host of the Corey Morgan Show. So today we're going to be talking to you all about the We Unify Reclaiming Canada Conference with our special guest, Jeremy Maddock. Jeremy Maddock is a freelance legal researcher who holds a Juris Doctor from the University of Victoria. He provides legal research support to various lawyers, often in cases involving constitutional issues. He was also a local candidate in the last Victoria City Council election.
Good evening, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Good evening, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to see you. As the communications director for We Unify, it's a pleasure to have We Unify connected with the Alberta Prosperity Project.
Absolutely. That's what we're all about, is unifying people across the country and creating connections.
100%. I completely agree. It's so important, especially in this time of division, to have us work together so that we can achieve common goals. So I'm going to start off with basically a first question. What was the inspiration behind the creation of the We Unify Reclaiming Canada Conference?
So We Unify Canada was a group of citizens that just came together in a grassroots way in the fall of 2021, when the COVID measures were ramping up to the degree of dividing society, dividing vaccinated from unvaccinated, dividing people based on their political opinions, dividing families. And we just wanted to unify everybody, bring people together for common solutions to preserve our fundamental freedoms and preserve some democracy in this country. So we started meeting every week I got involved around November of 2021. I think the group started in late September, if I recall, right around the time of the federal election, where I was a financial agent in the federal election. So that's where I started to learn about some of the freedom activities that were going on, and it was very encouraging to me that these things were happening. This group grew and grew to the point where we would have a couple hundred people out every Tuesday night. And break into teams. We had a legal team, which I was in charge of. We had an events team, which would plan rallies and protests and that. We had a community team, which would build community, and a science team that would research health and sciences. And it was just a lot of really exciting activism and kind of standing up to the idea that people had to be driven apart. People had to be alone in their homes. And we brought more people together than I've ever seen in a new political movement before. Then, of course, that sentiment of wanting to support freedom spread across the country, and by late January, the trucker convoy went to Ottawa, and there was a local convoy here in British Columbia as well. And the movement then was about, we supported that. We supported the idea of people protesting for their rights and freedoms, organized some great rallies, some really peaceful protest events at the legislature where everybody just came together and got to know each other. And we had guest speakers. We had Brian Peckford, the former Premier of Newfoundland, of course. And there was just this amazing energy. And as things started to change, as the government started to realize, maybe we can't do this without people getting really galvanized, and the mandates started to drop in the spring of 2022, there was a real sense that we needed to bring all these people together, that these people should all be talking to each other. And this shouldn't just be about COVID and mandates. This should be about creating the kind of democracy that we want in the future. It shouldn't just be about negative, what we don't like. It should be about what do we like? What kind of country do we want to live in? And that was the first annual Reclaiming Canada conference, which happened at the end of May of 2022. And it was a tremendous success. We brought together, we brought together well over several thousand people for the rally on the Saturday, and then several hundred got together on the Saturday night and the Sunday to brainstorm solutions, listen to speakers, and have meals together. And it was really just such a wonderful event that we felt it was so important to turn that into an annual thing and bring this into as a way of supporting and maintaining democracy in the future. So that's what we're doing.
Incredible. It's so incredible to see what We Unify has been up to and all the great successes they have had. I remember being at one of the protests in BC, and there was almost 20,000 people there. So it was phenomenal. Such great speakers.
The March 5th rally, I believe. And it was March 10th that Dr. Bonnie Henry announced that the mandates were being lifted. So I think somebody in the legislature looked out the window and said, these people aren't going away. We've got to do something about this.
100%. And it goes to show how powerful the people can be when we stand together and unify to, deal with the problems we face. Yeah. So my next question is, what are some of the notable speakers or guests that will be attending the conference?
Okay, so we've got a little booklet about this here, which I've is kind of duplicated on the website. You'll see these kinds of images, and there's a whole list on the website. But we've got divided really into 6 panels, 6 major areas. The first one is going to be, the first 2 are on Friday, May 26th, and those are media and activism. So we're going to have Drea Humphrey, for example, who's a Rebel News journalist, Rodney Palmer, who's a former CBC journalist, Rupa Subramaya, who's a True North journalist, and then Western Standard, Derek Filderbrandt, Harrison Faulkner from True North, Serena Friedenberg, who's an independent journalist. So just bringing together people from independent media, people who try and tell the other side of the story that the mainstream media doesn't necessarily tell. So just the experience of those people, why they do what they do, how they can keep doing it, how we can support them in doing it, and just an inside perspective on that. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Then we're going to move on later in the evening into the activism panel, which will have Christopher Scott of the Whistle Stop Cafe, Chris Barber of the Freedom Convoy, Vladislav Sobolev of Hugs Over Masks, Ron Valiant, a former PPC candidate, and Kip Warner, who's the executive director of the Canadian Association for Science and Public Policy, who brought some litigation against some of the COVID measures over time, and has been a great organizer and somebody who I've talked to quite a few times now about ongoing litigation that we're both involved in, but haven't had the chance to meet him in person and get to know him yet. So I think it'll be great to see him there and get a sense of what drives him and his organization and these people who've so tirelessly fought back against tyranny. Then when we move into the Saturday, we're going to talk about education. And that's where we've got Michelle Riddle of Resilient Health, Dan Anderson, who I know very well. He's the pastor of Oakland's Chapel, where I attend. And he's one of the few pastors in Victoria and in BC as a whole. I think there are a few in BC, only but very few when you look at the number of churches, who stood up and said, no, we're not going to stop meeting. We're not going to exclude people based on their vaccination status. Everyone is welcome here. The church is more needed than ever now. And he didn't fold to pressure and stood up for the right of Christians to worship together. And so Dan is a person I have tremendous respect for. He's going to be speaking. Cam Brar, who's a local business owner, and is going to talk about education and the effect of some of the government policies and some of the school board policies in particular on children. So this is really about, I guess the education panel is about community, about family, about children, about how to raise children in a very fallen world. And I think that this is another really interesting discussion. Then we move on to politics. And that, of course, politics stems from culture. It stems from education. It stems from what people learn when they're young and when they're in university and when they're in spiritual groups. Like, these things people bring forward into politics, right? So we'll have, of course, the Honorable Brian Peckford, who's the last surviving author of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Honorable John Rustad, who's a longtime MLA here in BC, leader of the BC Conservative Party now, trying to bring a new political movement into BC and establish some common sense in our politics. Christopher Shaw, who's a university science professor and doctor, who he ran for a local office up in North Cowichan on Vancouver Island in the last election, and myself, who I have a legal background, and I ran for council in the last Victoria municipal election. And then there's Philip Davidson, who helped us with our political cause, establishing a new political movement, a local political movement from the ground up. And he's also the leader of BC Public Servants Employees for Freedom. So he was with a group of public servants who were put on unpaid leave or even terminated just for their own personal healthcare decisions around whether or not they wanted to receive the COVID vaccine. And Phil was just a tremendous leader of those people, and kept them motivated, kept them from losing hope. So I think that he'll be a great addition to the panel. Then when we move into Sunday, we're going to have the health panel with Dr. Emmanuel Parenteau, who's hosting, emceeing the conference. He's another good friend of mine, also ran for Victoria City Council, tremendous advocate for just common sense and accountability in local government, and a local chiropractor. He's very learned in science. He gives lectures at the church that are always very interesting. He did one recently on climate change, which I found fascinating. Then we've got Dr. Anna Kindy, who's a doctor from Up Island in Campbell River, and has really stood up for patient freedom, patient rights, and tried to help in ways that are tremendously difficult as a practicing physician, but she's a very brave woman. Then we've got Paul Alexander, Dr. Paul Alexander from the U.S. Department of Health, Dr. Stephen Pellett from the Canadian COVID Care Alliance. I've had the opportunity to meet him at a few rallies, really smart guy. Dr. Stephen Malthouse, another really smart guy with the Canadian Health Alliance. He's given up so much, but he's just tried to tell the truth and put the facts forward, and you got to respect that. Then, of course, we've got Dr. Christopher Milburn and Dr. William Mackus, who I haven't met yet, but I hear that they have a lot of interesting things to say, so I'm looking forward to meeting them. Then, of course, we've got the law panel, which I'll also be playing a role in that, along with John Carpe from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, Leighton Gray, who I understand you guys also are hosting soon. He's a constitutional lawyer who's been involved in a lot of the cases around mandates and freedom over the last couple of years. Charles Lugosi, who's been to the Supreme Court of Canada more times than I think anybody can count. He's just a tireless advocate, always seems to have energy, always seems to have answers, and just such a wealth of knowledge. And Omar Sheikh, who's worked with the BC Public Servants for Freedom and others to save people's jobs and fight these mandates in the courts. So such a necessary function, and such a principled, intelligent guy. So I just amazing list of speakers. I have to say, these are just the experience of seeing all these people together and communicating with them and interacting with them is just going to be an incredible weekend.
Yeah, I second that. What an incredible list of speakers. What incredible panelists. We have people from all aspects of the freedom movement here. Um, it's so great to see. This is what we need to be doing as a society, bringing all these incredible people who are the best in their field together, so that they can showcase and demonstrate the truth about everything going on. So I'll move on to the next question. Um, how many attendees do you expect to attend, and what is the number of people the conference can host?
Well, we're aiming to sell as many tickets as possible. I think we're going to cap out at an absolute limit of around 400. Probably for meals and that, it's going to be about 300. So we're trying to make it as flexible as possible. We're offering for people who just want to come one day to see a particular panel or two panels and don't necessarily want the meals and the networking, can come for as little as $50. And then we've got options for tickets with a meal. And then for the whole weekend, to see all the panels, all the speakers with meals, with networking, is going to be $300. So we can certainly, for the full deal, we can accommodate up to 300 people. But if we have up to 400, we're going to find a way of squeezing them in, because everybody should be able to attend. This needs to be accessible to as many people as possible.
Yes, 100%. Accessibility is so key. Everyone needs to hear about this. In regards to the topics that are being covered, I was wondering if you could dive deeper in regards to the goals behind each topic being addressed at the conference.
Well, the two panels that I'm involved in are politics and law. And I think the goals, and just generally for all the panels, but I know those are the ones that I'm most closely acquainted with, and they are all about finding solutions. So, for example, in politics, we all see the problems with the mainstream parties. In the last federal election, we had a Liberal Party that was bent on dividing and excluding people, and we had a Conservative Party that was waffling and just wasn't much better. So I guess the question is, do we try and change some of these parties from the inside, or do we create our own? John Rustad, of course, has a perspective on that he's taken. He's trying to revive an old party, the BC Conservative Party, and turn it into something new, turn it into something that inspires people. So he'll be talking about that. I'll be talking about my experience locally with the Vancouver Island Voters Association, which is Viva Victoria, which was a group of a brand new political group that we started from the ground up in early 2022. And we ran 13 candidates in an election in October of 2022. And that in itself, 13 candidates, none of whom had run for office before, by the way, myself included. And we had 7 for city council, 6 for school board, and just tried to deliver a message of accountability, of democracy, of ensuring that our politics is done in an honest way. Not particularly an ideological group. We had people from across the map. I'm a little more right-leaning libertarian in my philosophy, but we had people who were quite on the left or as well, and exchanging ideas. Everybody was. We had people from every background, all over the world, who'd grown up in all different parts of Canada, who had different political backgrounds. But we shared this desire, and we do share. The Viva will be forming, will be running again in the next election, and we remain a nonprofit society that's still active today. We share this commitment to accountable governance, and that the people should know what the government's doing, and should have a say in how things are operated. So I stand by that vision, and I'll be talking about Viva and how people can get involved locally. Same with Dr. Christopher Shaw. He ran up in North Cowichan, different municipality, but a totally different slate of people, but we shared some of the same values and principles and ideas. So just bringing people together who've had political experience, new politicians, trying to pose solutions. That's the goal of the politics panel. And it's not about problems. It's not about complaining about our existing politicians. It's about posing solutions. How are we going to do it better? And that's the real gist of it. Then you also mentioned on other panels, like the law panel, it's going to be about solutions. It's going to be, we have a legal system that isn't necessarily accessible to people. It's not necessarily responsive to public needs. I have ideas on how to make it better, but it's really about taking questions, panel members sharing their experiences, bouncing ideas off one another, and trying to arrive at some practical solutions that can really make a difference and make justice accessible and affordable and just open to the community.
Another question I wanted to touch on is, what got you interested into politics?
Well, I think I started studying. I studied political science in university, and I realized, I think, when I was in my probably around 20 years old, that I was libertarian leaning. That I believe that people can govern themselves better than the government can do things for them, and that often there's unintended consequences to government action. So back in 2010, I think it was, some friends and I established a group called the Victoria Libertarian Book Club, where we would plow through very dense books about economics and about human behavior and politics, and just share ideas. And so that really was a formative experience for me. And that club still exists, but it's more like a barbecue club that gets together a couple times a year now. And some of the same old faces that I've known for years and years. We always have interesting discussions. So that was sort of my introduction to politics. I subsequently got into law. Worked for a very well-known free speech lawyer named Douglas Christie, who argued some of the big free speech cases before the Supreme Court of Canada. And I had the privilege of working with him for 3 years. Learned a lot about the justice system. That was sort of my crash course in what the justice system was. And I went into that thinking, if you have principles, if you have the right argument, if you're right, you should be able to go before a judge and make a rational argument, and you win your case. But I soon realized that there was a lot of forces at play, that there is no bright line between law and politics. They overlap, and often the courts make decisions for political reasons.
Yeah.
So that's something that I came to learn. But I went to law school at the urging of various friends and family of mine who thought I was good at it, and I thought, yeah, I'll give this a shot. During law school, I created my own research business where I tried to help people with freedom-related issues, made the connections with a lot of lawyers, and I still do that to this day. So I try to base my work, the kind of work I do, on ensuring a fair relationship between the individual and the state, and making sure that the state is accountable for what they do to people.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in 2020, COVID came along, and the entire relationship between the individual and the state was shifted. Like there was this earthquake where all of a sudden you couldn't even go out and see your friends anymore. And I was taken aback by that. I felt like we should be doing something, but it seemed like nobody was doing anything initially. And then in 2021, as this movement started to ramp up around preserving our freedoms and restoring our democracy, I realized I needed to get involved and put some of these libertarian principles I'd been discussing for years in the abstract, start putting them into action.
Incredible. That's so incredible. So proud of you. And it's such an honor to hear what you've been up to. And one question I had is, do you feel the justice system currently in Canada is as corrupt as many believe?
Well, I don't know what many people believe. I think there's some good judges, and I think there's some judges that are quite biased. The appointment process, unfortunately, is based on the government makes the decisions as to who gets appointed up through the system. So the people who are at the top of the system tend to be people who the government at least doesn't object to, and they tend to defer to government. So one example I'll give is the Chief Justice of Manitoba made a decision about the shutting down of churches. And he said it's not the role of the courts to second guess the decisions of the public health officer. Well, in my view, of course, it is very much the role of the courts if those decisions engage the Constitution of our country. We have to have a court that second guesses them. Otherwise, think of all the profound injustices that could be done. Think of all the atrocities even that could be done by a public health officer, a rogue public health officer who had negative intentions. So that kind of statement to me just seems ridiculous. It is the role of the courts to ensure that our constitutional rights are protected.
Mhm. I
And
completely.
in British Columbia, I try to push for constitutional right. I agree with them and argued that this was a breach of the Section 7 right to liberty. I was not impressed with the decision I got in response. The decision was basically, oh, well, your right to move around your own community isn't liberty. It's you had your choice to whether or not to get vaccinated. You chose not to, so you should suffer the consequences. You could just as easily have gotten vaccinated and had different consequences. But that's so contrary to security of the person. The government doesn't get to make your life more difficult because of your core personal decisions. And I think intellectually, the case law, the backing of our legal system is strong. Like, we have these principles that are baked in. The question is, are the courts willing to enforce them? And I'm still hopeful that there will be courts that are, and that's why I'm going to the BC Court of Appeal on that issue.
Mhm. Another question I had for you, Jeremy, is what do you think is the biggest issue currently with our justice system?
I think accessibility of our justice system. Ordinary people don't necessarily understand how it works. It's like it's intended not to be accessible or open, because a lot of the language, a lot of the way that the courts operate is not friendly to ordinary people. That the legal systems recognize that. I think there's been some movement to say that it should be made more accessible. Like, everybody says that. I don't think anybody disagrees with what I'm saying there. But to this day, I talk to self-represented litigants, and that they don't know how to navigate the system. And then if you can't afford $300 an hour for a lawyer, then you don't get justice. And a lot of people, I'm in a situation, because I'm not a practicing lawyer. I work for lawyers. I do consulting work for lawyers, but I'm not in a position to go to court and represent people. So I'm often having to tell people, well, I'm sorry, if you can't afford a lawyer and you can't represent yourself, it doesn't matter that you have a good case. You're out of luck. And I hate telling people that, but I tell them that every day, and I see the faith draining out of their eyes, and the fact that they no longer trust our system. I hate doing that to people, but I sometimes have to, and it's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree, Jeremy. It's definitely a very interesting time within all aspects of our government and our society. Another question I had for you is, do you feel that local politics is as important as federal politics, or what do you feel is the more important of the two? If
Local
so,
politics, I think, is probably easier for individuals to influence than federal politics, because that's why I chose to run there as opposed to federally, because I saw I watched the federal campaign very closely, and I saw the tremendous uphill battle that independent candidates and PPC candidates and others had in really getting a foothold. I think local politics is, you can affect bread and butter issues in your community, like how your roads are set up, how your community functions, just efficiency and treatment of ordinary people day to day. So it's very important. There's a lot of things local politics can't do, but between police and schools and all kinds of local responsibilities, probably that's of um, so I'm not going to say it's more or less important. The is potentially if you have the backing of a party, you're probably more likely that you can make a difference in local politics than federal politics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have another, coming back to the Reclaiming Canada conference. What type of opportunities are there for attendees to connect and network with one another?
Well, it's those who come for the whole weekend. You're going to be seated in a room full of the other attendees. There will be dinners. There will be, I think, there's going to be a brunch at noon and a dinner on both Saturday and Sunday. So you'll have a chance to talk to people there. There will be Q&A sessions in some of the panels. So you'll be able to hear the questions that other attendees ask and maybe talk to them about it afterwards. We certainly are trying to build as much time into the schedule as possible just for mixing and mingling and chatting. So dinner's at 7, and the place will be open till approximately 10 o'clock, I believe. So there'll be plenty of social and networking time.
Incredible. And yeah, just for everyone on the live stream here, the conference is happening from May 26th to May 28th, and it'll be in Victoria, British Columbia. It is the largest freedom conference in Canada currently, and it's a super exciting experience for many to see the most and talk about what's currently going on in our society here in Canada. Another question I have for you, Jeremy, was what can people do to help make the Reclaiming Canada conference a success?
I think the main thing is just to buy a ticket and as soon as possible, and to attend and show your support. Show these speakers that they're there for a reason. People want to hear what they have to say, and just help build a network, build a nationwide network. This isn't about just BC. This isn't about just Victoria. It's a much bigger project than that, and we don't want to have a monopoly on this. We want to have others who come to be inspired and to bring their own events and their own ideas forward. So just such a tremendous opportunity to cross-fertilize and network across the country.
Mm-hmm. Because one of We Unify's goals is to unite all freedom-loving Canadians across Canada. So it's so exciting to see that we're able to put this together so quickly. Another question I have is, how does the conference aim to contribute to the larger movement of freedom in Canada?
Again, that networking is, I think, the big thing, but also those who are there with a cause, with something that they want to get done, like whether it's a political leader who's running for office, or whether it's a legal leader like John Carpe, for example. These are people who need a solid group of supporters. They need to fundraise, and they need to know that they have people's backing. So there will be plenty of opportunities to talk to these people directly, see what they're up to, and if there's somebody that you want to support, no, you're not required to support anybody, but if you find something that especially appeals to you or that you want to get involved in, this is the opportunity for that. And these people need both. They need financial assistance. They also need volunteers in a lot of cases. So there's really something for everyone to do. If you want to get involved in the freedom movement, it's all about getting people out there. And I like I said, in 2021 and early 2022, we had this tremendous groundswell of support of people who just wanted to be working together out there in the community. And it was so inspiring to see. And maintaining those numbers is important, because it's not like these threats to our freedoms have gone away. The most visible aspects of the mask mandates and the passports and that have gone for now, but the underlying legal and political system that would impose that on people remains, and they're imposing things very sinister things right now, like Bill C-11, which is going to undermine freedom of speech on the internet. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with that. A lot of them probably are, but that's the idea that internet is now treated as a broadcasting undertaking. So just like when you turn on your television, there's certain things that can't be played on television because they're censored, because they're not appropriate. The internet is now going to be regulated in that way. And it doesn't just apply to big. They say, oh, it's just about getting Disney and Netflix and that to pay their fair share. It's not really, because they say it applies to user-generated content. And the Senate then tried to amend that bill and say, well, you're not really, you say you're not intending to apply it to user-generated content, so why don't we just take that section out? The House wouldn't take that section out. They want that section in there, and they are going to use this to censor user-generated content. And ordinary people like yourself and myself on the internet could be could be curtailed in what we can and can't say. And people generally who just are consumers of internet content are going to, they might be subtle at first, but they're going to see changes in their algorithm. They're going to see changes in what they see. And this is going to make Canada's internet more like China's internet, where if you go to China and you try to access Twitter, for example, or various other social networking platforms, you'll just get a big red screen and it won't turn up because it's blocked. And if you go to Google in China, you can access Google, but try typing in something like Tiananmen Square. You'll see a bunch of serene monuments and beautiful, picturesque scenery of the square and the city. You won't see tanks mowing down student protesters because they don't want you to see that, because China controls what its citizens can see, and Canada is going to do the same under Bill C-11. So that's the kind of thing that the government's doing quite quietly with less fanfare. It's not as noticeable in our day-to-day lives as COVID restrictions, but it is happening, and it's the responsibility of freedom-loving Canadians to stand up against that kind of thing.
Exactly. As Canadians, we have to stand up for this. We have to stand up for the truth and for freedom of speech. And this is how, from what I've heard in my knowledge, communist countries have done this left, right, and center. They control what people see initially, and then by doing so, they manage to control what people think. And that's how you shift a culture. So I have another question for you, Jeremy. What other things are the federal government doing that you are watching and should concern us?
Well, federally, they're certainly they've declared war on law-abiding firearms owners. I know that, and that's quite sinister because they talk about assault weapons and weapons of war. It's not weapons of war that they're typically banning now. It's various hunting rifles that many Canadians have a legitimate use for, and they're reclassifying things, which is dangerous when they use words dishonestly, when they use language dishonestly like that. It's dangerous to more than just gun owners, because you realize that they can reclassify anything and say, oh, it didn't used to be an assault weapon. It used to be a hunting rifle. Now it's an assault weapon. So you got to give it up to the government. That means that the government defines concepts. They define items. They define, what about if we start applying that to motor vehicles? Oh, this motor vehicle is too dangerous to the environment. So you're going to have to not drive that anymore. You're not allowed to drive your car anymore because it's just too dangerous. They're already doing it to big rig trucks built before a certain date. What's to say they're not going to do that with automobiles? And then you get ordinary people of limited means who can't afford a brand new Tesla or whatever they're allowed to buy, and their old car gets scrapped because it has to be for legal purposes. Oh, we just redefined what's allowed. So I'm just saying the same thing that the federal government is doing with guns, they're doing with trucks. They could easily do with cars, and there's limitless danger, and a lot of people think it's provincial jurisdiction over things like what I just mentioned, motor vehicles, for example. But we look at things like the carbon reference case last year, which said, oh, well, if it involves the environment, the federal government has a role to play, even in provincial jurisdiction. So what doesn't involve the environment? I mean, that's a huge level of new regulation and new measures against our day-to-day lives that can be imposed by Ottawa, by people from other provinces and other mindsets who we will never meet, will never be accountable to us, and yet they're governing our day-to-day lives. And I find that quite concerning, which is one reason why devolving to the local is probably a good thing, if we can get more local control over some of these issues, just to allow regions to protect themselves. But at this point, the case law and the political will in Canada has been drifting very much towards centralized federal control.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some of our viewers were discussing Bill C-18. Are you familiar with Bill C-18?
Yeah, so that's kind of an expansion on, I think, some of the same themes in Bill C-11. That's where social media companies will have to pay for news. So if you link to a news item on Facebook, for example, then Facebook would have to pay a nominal amount. But there's, if enough people link to a news item, then that nominal amount can add up to be quite high. I think the impetus behind it is mainstream media in Canada has really suffered and fallen economically over the last few years. And the government has been subsidizing it to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And they're trying to find a way to, because the government's broke, they're trying to find a way to generating revenue. So they're wanting the social media companies to subsidize you. That means the government doesn't have to subsidize the matter, but I think the government likes to have a control over what's being said in the news, and we see that all the time. There's Justin Trudeau himself joked about it. Oh, they say that the media treats us they treat us better than the other parties for no good reason. Well, in fact, there is a very good reason. We just gave them $600 million, and he gets a big laugh, right? But it's funny because it's true, and he knows it's true. So that's it's all about trying to throw a bone to Canadian media, and in exchange, the Canadian media will prop up the government's ideology. It's a very incestuous relationship, and I think that's what's motivating Bill C-18.
We have some starred comments here. The first one is: will any speakers be recorded or live streamed for those of us who can't make it in Victoria?
Yes, there will be a live stream option. Keep an eye on the weunify.ca website for that, because it will be, it definitely, the whole thing's going to be recorded, and there will be live streaming. I believe that that's going to be by donation, so there may be some nominal donation asked for to watch, but it will be quite affordable. Again, we want to make the conference accessible to everybody who can watch and who's interested.
Are there any other specific bills that haven't been mentioned so far that you're worried about?
Well, I was shifting gears to the province. I was involved in a town hall last night on a bill called Bill 36. That's a BC provincial bill, and it totally overwhelms, overhauls our healthcare system. And it was done with very little consultation, very little debate. And it basically says that all the healthcare colleges now, they're collapsing the healthcare colleges from 24 different health professions down into 6. And all the boards of those healthcare professions get appointed by the government instead of elected by the professionals themselves. So that's basically a complete government takeover of healthcare, which BC has been doing for a while. I don't know if you followed the whole Cambie surgery case, but that's a case where they have been trying very hard to shut down private clinics. And they've basically succeeded now in saying that if you are on a wait list, no matter how long you're on a wait list, you're not allowed to pay your own doctor, because that's contrary to the Canada Health Act. But meanwhile, there's a constitutional right to security of the person. It's another one of those cases where I just can't see why an individual's right to have a relationship with their doctor, which might involve payment, or it might just involve, when the Bill 36 is concerned, it's about the flow of information. There's tragic situations. One I heard about at the town hall last night, where a doctor was speaking with a patient and said, the patient asked, should I get vaccinated for COVID? And the doctor knew this patient very well, and they had various health conditions. And the doctor said, well, given your health background, I can't recommend that you take this vaccine. And the patient said, well, can you write me a medical note, because my employer is asking for proof of vaccination? And the doctor said, I'm sorry, I can't write you a medical note. If I did that, I would lose my job. And I've heard personally of so many situations. I've seen friends of mine who've been impacted by this, losing jobs, and doctors being afraid to stand up for their medical autonomy. So the slogan that we're kind of using as at the moment, just off the cuff slogan, is "You deserve your doctor's honest opinion." And Bill 36 prohibits doctors from spreading misinformation, whatever that means. And there's always been some regulation of what doctors can say in the course of their practice. But the difference now is that it will be government appointees making the decision on what is misinformation, what can doctors say and not say. That's scary because they're not going to be able to bring their skill and judgment and professional independence to the table, and they're not going to be able to help patients as well as they otherwise could have. So that really worries me, and I think it's something that we're trying to stand up against locally here in BC.
Yeah, I've been talking lots with some of the doctors within my network, and they're all very concerned with Bill C-36 in regards to how doctors now can be fined if they push misinformation, almost $200,000, face potential jail time, I believe, as well as lose their medical license right away. I bet you viewers would like for you to touch on that.
Yeah, well, those are the very high end of the possible penalties, and they're largely there to scare people. I think what they usually try and do with doctors first is bully them into compliance. But if they're not willing to comply, then yeah, they lose their careers and they can face these very, very stringent penalties up to and including jail time. So the government's not messing around when they tell doctors this is what you can and can't say. And we see, for example, Dr. Malthouse, who's speaking at the conference, has already had his medical license suspended, at least for the time being, just for speaking out politically and writing letters to the editor and trying to make his points of view known. And Dr. Hoff, another doctor from the interior of BC, he sounded the alarm early on in the vaccination campaign because he had a lot of First Nations patients from his area who were being vaccinated. They were the first group to qualify for vaccination, and he noticed all these very concerning side effects. He tried to bring it up. The news of his campaign and his concerns made its way to Dr. Henry, and Dr. Henry's emails were released sometime later. Dr. Henry's response to it was, "Is this an issue we should be raising with the college? Maybe we should just report this guy," right? So she wasn't interested in what he had to say. She was interested in shutting him up, which is very concerning. And I think when you've got doctors who have real concerns like that, we owe them a fair hearing. It's their job to sound the alarm. But sadly, the powers that be prevent them from doing so. And you need to look no further than the shifting public health guidance throughout the pandemic on an issue like the lab leak theory, for example. Initially, it was considered to be an irresponsible conspiracy theory. If you said that the virus originated from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, you might as well be wearing a tinfoil hat. Now, most professionals and honest people who've looked at this question from both the US and Canada and Europe and all over the world acknowledge that almost certainly the genetic code of this particular virus could not have arisen naturally. And they just grudgingly admit, oh yeah, we were wrong about that. Well, what about all the people who were afraid to speak about it in the first place? And same thing with masks, right? Initially, masks didn't work at all. There's no reason to get masks. And then all of a sudden they were mandated. Everybody had to wear them whether you wanted to or not. And then they did a study on it after the fact and said, oh, there's no difference. Some states had mask mandates, some didn't. No difference in COVID transmission based on mask mandates. And the New York Times published an article. Oh yeah, no difference. It didn't make any difference. Well, it was mandated on people. And a doctor who I think one of the concerns with Dr. Malthouse was he was giving out mask exemptions to people with serious breathing difficulties who were greatly compromised by having to wear a mask. And the college came down on him like a ton of bricks for trying to help people with a genuine medical concern when the mask wasn't doing anything in the first place. So it's just you see how these misinformation rules can be misapplied and really abused. And it worries me so much that doctors aren't allowed to share their honest opinions. And doctors should be allowed to disagree. They should be able to disagree with one another and have these conversations in the open. That's how you get to the truth. But when you have a government regulator telling doctors, this is what you can say, this is what you can't say, then you're never going to get to the truth, or at least it's going to be a very slow and painful process, potentially with people dying along the way. So this is serious business.
Exactly. It's all coercion, I think, on the end of the government and medical boards to push our doctors and our citizens into conforming with social norms and social narratives so that they can control what these doctors think, how they act, how they react, with penalties to scare them. And it's really, really unfortunate to see, but we do need our doctors to stand up for the truth, stand up for what is right, because the truth will set us free. And it's so very important. So by creating a conference quite like the Reclaiming Canada conference, we can provide the stage for doctors, lawyers, politicians, organizations that are countering the narrative, standing up for freedom, to work together to push forward our voice, the people's voice. Um, so it's incredible what you're doing, Jeremy. It's incredible what the Reclaiming Canada conference stands for and what We Unify Canada stands for. They are actively looking for donations, so anything helps. If you would like to donate, you can go to the weunify.ca website and donate there. I'm going to look through any of our other starred comments and questions within the comment section to see if there's any key questions our audience has. I did notice that one of our viewers wanted to learn more about Bill C-21. I was wondering if you could touch on that.
I haven't looked into that one. I'm sorry. Maybe in a future show.
Okay, beautiful. All good. No worries. I'm just going to check. So I think we're coming to a close here. What I wanted to remind our viewers about is the upcoming members only meeting in Bowen, Alberta on June 17th. Our guest speakers include Dr. Dennis Modry, Jeff Rath, Chris Scott, Layden Gray, Michael Wagner, and Corey Morgan. Please, if you'd like to attend, get your tickets now. You can get your tickets at albertaprosperityevents.com. Super exciting stuff in the works here, both in Alberta and in BC. Great people are standing up for the truth. They're working hard to counter the narrative and stand up for what is right for the people, for our children. So super grateful today, Jeremy, for having you attend, having you spread awareness about the Reclaiming Canada conference and everything you're working tirelessly for and towards. Your hard work does not go unnoticed. We're very, very grateful that there are people like you within our communities to stand up for what is right and for freedom. Because
well, I couldn't do it without the community behind me, without the support behind me, and that's what We Unify has been. That's what like a lot of local groups like Viva has been, and there are others in my area and in many, I'm sure, across Canada. So the idea is just getting these people talking to each other, getting these people unified, and maybe some people are just interested in local politics. Some people are just interested in federal, but those people should all be talking. When you see the other side, when you see the NDP, for example, or the Liberals, they have networks, they have ways of maintaining huge mailing lists, and we need to do that on a grassroots level, where when we have a cause, when we have an idea, we can reach the people we need to reach, and that's what we're trying to create here.
Yeah. So just to remind everyone, the Reclaiming Canada conference will be this May 26th, 27th, and 28th in Victoria, British Columbia. And we hope that you all attend. If you do not plan on attending, please do spread awareness and share information about this conference. This is the largest gathering of freedom-minded people standing out, countering the narrative within Canada. We have a breadth of doctors, lawyers, politicians, people within the education system, media, and activism, all working tirelessly for all of us together. We're all in this together. And yes, just it's so great to see how many people are also viewing our live stream today. We have a huge array of comments, people engaged, people asking questions. So grateful for everyone that attended today. And thank you again, Jeremy, for being here. Super grateful.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's a great way of spreading the word and getting people engaged.
100%. And in regards to people going down the rabbit hole per se, or young people that don't know what to do, the thing is, get active, build community, connect with people. The reason they wanted us divided throughout the pandemic was so that we didn't connect, so we weren't aware of what was going on, so that they can control what we see through the media and what we hear. So you got to work together, build groups of people that are well connected, engaged, informed, working together, and understand the truth, because that is the most important thing. And so working together, I think in Alberta, we need to have a Reclaiming Canada conference here. I definitely think so many people would attend that conference here. And maybe that's what we need to do to unify Canada, is have a Reclaiming Canada conference in each province to bring the most incredible freedom-loving minded people together in each province. Because I know it could be difficult for people, let's say on the East Coast or in Mexico or in the States, to attend a conference in BC, but let's say it's in Toronto, Calgary, Montreal. The options are endless. We just have to work together and really spread awareness about We Unify and how to replicate what has been accomplished in Victoria elsewhere.
I love that vision. So if anybody wants to get in touch through the We Unify website, we're very interested in sharing our experience and helping people in other jurisdictions organize in a similar way that we are.
Awesome. Well, we'll probably end it there. Thanks again, Jeremy. I hope you have a great rest of your evening. I am super grateful. Gratitude and love for you, Jeremy.
You too. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.